Welcome, guys. It is Will here from the Wotsupp podcast. Today we have on Brendan Smith, mate. You're a long-term mate of mine. But apart from that, the reason I'm getting you on today is because you have a massive background in everything from high-level golfing to endurance sports, then into remedial massage therapies, and now today functional neurology is your sort of passion project that you're just starting into. And I recently bumped into you at a friend's house party, funnily enough, mate, and you gave me a treatment in the middle of the kitchen there, and I had a shoulder niggle that was nearly 10 years in the making. Since we were at school together, I had that, but Nicky, like real bad shoulder. And man, you managed to get more mobility in that than I had in the last probably 5-10 years of remedial stuff. Literally in the kitchen of a house at a house party, just making a few adjustments. And I wanted to get you in today to try and show people I've done everything from needling and cupping and massage work, and I've done mobility work and prehab work and all of it, and be able to get that level of relief from pain and immediate adjustment in range of motion, literally just standing there making a few movements was utterly mental, man. So I wanted to get you on here and pick your brain on how that started and how did you even stumble across that? So for yourself, mate, what led you down that rabbit hole of trying to, I suppose, hack into the neurology, so nervous system stuff more than your earlier stuff, which was obviously more physical when you're doing more your remedial work?
Yeah. I suppose through golf, endurance sport and stuff like that, you're always getting your own body maintenance work done. And then you find new tips and tricks to kind of help maintain your own body, right? Just to keep it ticking along, because at the end of the day, we can't afford to see the chiro or have a massage every day, even though you feel you need it some days. And it was actually through my own hardship doing remedial massage, and you could get some great results. I loved getting massage probably more than most people, but then I developed an ankle anterior tib inflammation, so like the arch of my foot felt like it was dropping. I was getting horrible shin pain, and I'd been doing endurance sport at that point for like 7 or 8 years, and no chronic issues like that. I'd been lucky, or whatever you want to call it, but and then I did all the knowledge that I had. I used every trick and tool on myself. Nothing was working. I was seeing a chiropractor at the time, and I didn't just see these people once. I spent, I do 6 or 8 sessions with each person trying to get help. I saw osteos, chiros, acupuncturists. I even got a bit desperate and saw a podiatrist, and that was no help at all. And then I met this guy who was talking about neuroplasticity, and I was on a balance beam, and 10 minutes of being on a balance beam, first time in 5 months, I had no ankle pain. And then within a couple of weeks of doing that, I was able to go back running. Still wasn't 100% right, but it was a dramatic improvement. Like I could go for a 30-minute run without worrying when it was going to flare up. And then I just went hard down that rabbit hole of the brain, the nervous system, did every course known to man during like lockdowns and everything like that. And then it was great content, plenty of knowledge, but a lot of those courses still required people to go home and do lots of rehab, lots of corrective exercises and that kind of thing. And to be honest, I didn't feel right sending people home with that. Most people don't stick to it. I was the good little student who would do 30 minutes of corrective exercise every day before they went for a run or whatever it may be. And I just thought, no, there has to still be better answers out there. And then I saw this picture on Instagram in early 2021 or something like that. And it was an old elderly gentleman, and he was bent over like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, like the worst posture you could probably picture. And within 4 sessions, this guy was standing with probably better posture than I had at that point. And I was like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but whatever it is, I need to know about it. And that was a guy named Sean Sherman. He started what's called Square One System. So during COVID, I'm jumping on calls, learning from this guy, taking all these courses. But the first time I met him, he worked on me. So I'm doing all the work on myself, and he's just telling me what to do over the phone. And with my golf swing and my running, I always had super tight adductors on my right leg, couldn't externally rotate my right leg that well. Heaps of SI joint pain on the right side. And he worked on me. I didn't even tell him what my issues were. I said, can you just work on me? Sat up at the end of the session and my leg just flopped out and I could just feel my eyes nearly fell out of my head. And I was like, that's insane. If you can do this to me from the other side of the world, like I know I'm in the right place. And I just went hook, line and sinker down that pathway, and it's just the rabbit hole's just got deeper and deeper since.
So that was probably your experience, much like the one I had, I'd say, where like we're up at the start of the podcast there in the kitchen, where I've had restricted range of motion for years, niggles, pains, inflammation, bursitis, tendonitis, all the fun itises, and just always been just a grind doing any upper body workouts and so on. And then to be able to straight away get full range of motion, overhead, internal and external rotation was really cool. So it sounds like you've had a similar experience there, and I like how you've got parallels where you've done it yourself as an athlete. I mean, as long as I've known you, you've had doing pursuits with Ironman events where you're doing 10, 15, 20 hours a week on a bike or running, or like you weren't just it's like classic gym bro doing 3 or 4 hours of gym a week. It's you're doing huge marathon sessions, literally doing ultras and stuff. Man, it's a huge athletic background you've had. So talk to me about, I suppose, when we're talking about nervous system a little bit there, we touched on briefly some of the things you were starting to go down as a rabbit hole, right? And I love this, and the reason we clicked when we first started talking about it was I suppose from a supplemental world, I've always identified that people have got really jacked up nervous systems, right? People are very stuck in flight or fight. They're overstimulated, they're under eating, people are stressed, they're overworked, they're buggered, they're in constant burnout, their immune systems are trash. And it's a combination of factors, right? Like we're living a very fast-paced lifestyle. It's go, go, go. It's text, calls, emails, phone, work, gym, family commitments, work. There's so many factors. There's so much in our lifestyle now that's just noise to our nervous system, right? And so I really enjoy this space that you've gone into, because I see it from a different angle of where I've come into it from, trying to help people fix whether they've had autoimmune diseases or issues or gut issues, or they've had poor sleep quality for years, which has led to other dysfunctions, and they're finding that they're, inflammation in the gut or poor digestion, or they're tired physically but mentally just wired and can't switch off. And I see all these things manifest from a jacked up nervous system. And so when you started speaking about nervous system, but more so how it ties into physiology as well, and how it can lead to dysfunctions in the physical form too, it was a really cool intersect, because I've spent years doing seminars and public speaking and podcasts and content around helping people identify symptoms of high cortisol, identify how their body should work, how their cortisol rhythm should function, and so on. And then you came in and we had this fun intersect of I suppose I've been coming up from this angle for years and you've come up from this way, and both naturally just met at the same point. So if you could, to give listeners at home a brief insight into, I suppose, where you see the role you see the nervous system playing in all this, because it's probably nothing that I've heard remedials ever talk about. When you look at like remedial therapies, whether that's physio, chiro, whether that's literally just remedial techniques, needling, cupping, whatever, the nervous system doesn't get mentioned, right? It's very much the meat suit's getting looked at, they're not caring if you're parasympathetic or sympathetic. They're not caring about, we're not talking about neurology here, right? So, mate, how did you come at that? 'Cause that's quite left of field. How did you get to the nervous system as a thing versus?
I suppose there's many angles of how the nervous system can come into it, but within any sort of manual therapy framework, we've got to assess someone, right, and paint a picture in our mind of how they got to that point. But we mainly do it in terms of, this is the reason why their adductors are tight, because they keep their wallet in their back pocket and it throws their hips out, or they sit at a computer and just using one arm all the time and bent over in poor posture all the time. Like, we jump to those conclusions, and sure, some of those things aren't ideal, but it's very assumptive to paint a picture of why someone's got shoulder pain, back pain is just because of those few things. We're way more complex than that. But I suppose in the simplest form is our brain's wired for 1, survival, and 2, reproduction at its most basic level.
Agreed.
And it's either going to perceive information, whether we think it's good or bad, our subconscious is going to interpret that as either something safe or as a threat. So you could have the best pillow in the world. You could be doing the best exercise routine in the world. But if your brain perceives that as a threat, it's actually having to compensate harder because it's like, okay, this guy wants to do this. So my number one job is to try and protect him. So how do I do that? Do I increase a bit of muscle tension in this leg to prevent him going into as deep of a lunge? Do I restrict his shoulder so that way when he goes to do a particular exercise, he can only lift so far before he feels like his rhomboids aren't activating well, or whatever context it is.
Tell me to work harder, right? And I'll drill down there for a second before we go further down that path, because that's what you just said is perfect. So when you say, I suppose the nervous system has two priorities, right? Survival and reproduction. Dead, spot on. When I think we live in a time where we overcomplicate the fact that we are in fact animals, right? Like we're the way we evolved, it was from much simpler times, and the modern conveniences we have now with artificial lighting and conveniences and TVs and technologies and how sedentary we are and all of that it makes up literally 0.0002% of human history. This is a very recent experience, what we live in now, compared to how we evolved. And you're right, we evolved in this space of it was like punch and run was because you literally could, like it was life or death, right? And you could freeze to death or starve to death and it's funny that those archaic sort of very old systems, and we see that in, I suppose when you're looking at neuroscience, you see it a lot with what parts of the brain you're activating in these particular states. Yeah. And your nervous system is the thing that's responsible for scanning the environment, detecting, am I safe? Do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Am I secure? Have I got shelter? And it then informs the hormones, it informs everything thereafter what to do. So I think what you said there was really well summarized and really well simplified. But I talk about this heaps in my body of work, and in the supplemental space, the most bang for your buck you get with anyone is looking at things like adrenal and sleep supps. As soon as you start managing that stressed out nervous system, their body gets a breather and chance to recover and repair and rebuild and stuff. So that's just a really good intersect. So walking down that, there are main priorities for it. And you're saying you're finding that when people were, I suppose there's our nervous system dictates that an area is or perceives something to be a threat or an issue, or we are already in flight or flight going into an activity of some description because of our busy lives or whatever's going on in that particular time. So from there, we're finding that we're having we're overcompensating, right? We're burning more resources as well doing it. I'm assuming I see that with high cortisol, is you're burning a shitload of resources just to live. So going further down that rabbit hole then with you, mate, so when you're seeing these people, what do you see in athletes where this happens? Like when you're working with people who have got this chronically jacked up nervous system, their body's obviously perceiving their environment as risky. What are some common things you've seen with patients early on that might give you hints that this is a thing? So just so people listening at home can get some take-home stuff,
Yeah. I suppose so. We've always pictured pain, a tight muscle, restricted movement as a quote-unquote bad thing. And don't get me wrong, they're very uncomfortable. But rather than chasing the symptom, we need to look at, because as coming back to that survival of staying alive and perceiving something as either safe or as a threat, the brain's is way smarter than we'll ever understand, and it's not going to produce these symptoms for no reason. It's using it as a protection strategy. So the more we can start to look at it through the lens of why is the brain trying to send these protective signals to my knee, my shoulder, whatever it may be, what's it trying to actually tell me? And where am I actually missing information to restore safety back to the brain in order for it to stop feeling the need to express the pain, the restricted movement, whatever it may be.
Yeah, gotcha.
High cortisol. Why is it producing that? Like, what is the survival mechanism or the protective strategy it's trying to use by rapidly increasing our cortisol and preventing us sleeping or preventing us being able to lift as heavy as we want to or run as far as we'd planned to on a particular day? What's it trying to tell us?
Yeah, I think the body's a beautifully adaptive animal, and that it'll keep you within your realms of recoverability a lot of the time. I didn't. I quite appreciate this enough, I think, as a younger man. I probably should have listened a lot more to this. I think a lot of us are guilty in our 20s of just bulldozing our way through volume and just training ourselves in the ground, grinding our bones to dust the way it feels at the time. But our body is a really, really clever animal at telling you when it's time to slow up, put the brakes on and try and it can do that in a nice way, which might be increasing, making you a bit more tired, slowing you down a little bit, decreasing cognitive function, just getting you to wind down a little, or it can do it in a not so cute way and things snap. And we can cause acute injuries, things get jacked up and tightened and restricted. So I suppose when we're talking about how can we try and when we're in that system there, so we've got the person with restricted movement. So if we're listening at home, we've got the restricted movement, the minimal ranges of motion, we're stiff all the time. We might have recurring patterns, and that was my thing with yours, that I had that dicky right shoulder and jacked up levator scap, jacked up rhomboids for years, right? And I always put it down to, I was doing the Y raises, T raises, the I raises, going through, playing around with prehab stuff as well, doing activation work. I'd get massaging probably once a fortnight, minimum once a month, throwing needling every second month with that as well, cupping, scraping, and really good relief in a sense. I suppose it's spending some time parasympathetic for one, it's spending some time in rest and digest, blood flow, heaps of benefits from that. But lo and behold, a week later, 2 weeks later, however long it was, it would come back. And I'd find myself in the same place in the exact same patterns, right? And we spoke about this when I was first picking your brain on this because it was really interesting to me. So when you see someone who's got a particularly persistent niggle injury, long-term dicky thing, whether it's that knee that, like in your case, where you found that you had that inability to have like good external rotation at the hip or whatever it might be. Early signs to look for that it's that. So what's giving you hints? Is it the fact that it's chronic or is it more acute? And then two, how do you start unpacking that? What are you looking at when you're starting to treat that person now as you approach it more functional neurology versus your old remedial days?
And I suppose it goes back to, like you said, with our lifestyles at the moment, right? Like it's a constant bombard of different sensory information. But there's a great doctor I listen to, Dr. Olivia Lessler, and she's incredible. She works in the realm of looking at the body really holistically. And she talks a lot about like the brain loves sensory information, but a lot of the sensory information that we put our bodies through every day is a lot of these foreign inputs that, as you said, like going back to our primitive state, which is a really sexy term to go back to our primitive state, but really our brain hasn't really changed a lot in that time. It's still geared towards survival. Our brain does love sensory information, but sensory information that it perceives as safe. So how many people do you see go to the beach? They wear thongs. They wear sunglasses, so the brain can't perceive the sunlight coming into the eye, so it doesn't know how much, how much protection to put to the skin. The brain's going, I can see the sand, but why can't I feel the sand? I'm wearing thongs, so sensory deprivation chambers of like our shoes. So our brain does love sensory information. So it's not about I need to block out as much as I can. It's trying to also balance modern day lifestyles with also bringing back some of these safety signals back to the brain. And these are things that people can do at home, like walk on the grass barefoot. Don't wear sunglasses when you're outside for a decent period of time. Touch the texture of the sand. Don't put sunscreen on as soon as you walk outside. Like these are very common things we can do in our day-to-day life that are actually safety signals to the brain. But in terms of movement, again, I don't really – where someone feels symptoms is – it can be informative sometimes, but to be honest, a lot of the time it doesn't really matter because everyone's reason for having shoulder pain, there could be 2,000 different reasons someone's got right shoulder pain, and it can be different from you to me to the next 20 people I work on. So I wouldn't be able to sit here and say, oh, you need to do this particular thing for your shoulder, because for you, from memory, when I worked on you, most of it come back to lumbar spine, left hip. So what sort of traditional routes have we ever seen where we go, oh, we're going to connect the lumbar spine to the hip? And it's not about assessing posture better. It's about where is there gaps in information where the brain is able to actually go, I'm trying to restrict my shoulder because I don't have enough sensory information and input into particular movements that the lumbar spine needs to perform and the left hip needs to perform when we come back to these survival patterns of getting up and down out of a chair or off the ground and locomotion, so walking or running. Where does it need more information with those two survival patterns to prevent the brain feeling like it needs to send all these protective strategies to your right shoulder in your case?
Yeah, sure. So it's a gap that it's trying to fill in the blanks itself and going, okay, so to prevent injury, I'm not entirely certain how to move through a particular range of motion. So I'll just fill in the blanks best I can by either jacking up above or below it potentially, or try to compensate somewhere else along the chain. And I guess that's an interesting one, because we were talking about this before, where you see that in those compensation mechanisms, like they love them in physiotherapy. We love them in like most of your anatomy stuff. Like a lot of time it can be, if you're just talking purely the musculature as opposed to the nervous system, you can be talking about that jacked up rhomboid levator could well be from, a tight QL on the left side, which is because of the collapsed arch on the right foot, which is because. So it's fun watching the chain events coming from a muscular perspective. But then when you hear that it could be from neural innervation not firing in a particular pattern or not having enough information, I think that's a cool point to drill down on, because the whole body thrives on information, right? And the nervous system is putting out millions of bits of information a second, trying to make everything fire and coordinate and move. So when we're saying we're missing bits of information, so what are some of the things that would lead to us missing that information or to that not functioning? Is that purely something that's happened around, I suppose, could that be a formative thing where it was never there in the first, like we never quite developed that in the first place? Could it be due to, injury or trauma or something that's doing it? Like what can cause the human experience to miss parts of that, neural input, I suppose, or those gaps that you're talking about?
I suppose that's a and I don't want to make more assumptions because we are complex. How we were birthed, how we developed. Did we crawl? Did we walk too soon? Did we fall over and hit our head too many times during that development? Which then the brain's going to go, okay, I need to protect my head. I'm going to compensate to prevent you falling and hitting your head more often. So what sort of upstream or downstream impacts is that going to have on how you develop your gait pattern? But so there's many different answers, but I would say one that most people could relate to is we've all burnt our finger on the stove. We've all potentially rolled our ankle running. We've all been kicked in the shin playing sport. We've all fallen off a trampoline or off a swing or whatever. And as much as we consciously move on from those injuries, our brain always remembers. So it doesn't matter that you rolled your ankle when you're 6 years of age, your brain's still compensating for that because it still remembers everything that happened at that point in time, what the smell was in the environment, what it heard at that time, what the sound was when you rolled your ankle, when the bone cracked because it's trying to protect the ligaments, the swelling, the stress of it. I've just rolled my ankle. Wow, I'm going to have a big fat blown up ankle for 2 weeks. If you're in an isolated environment, I've now got to get back to where someone can pick me up in the car to go home. So I had just as an example to that would be a client I worked on the other day, SI joint pain, hamstrings weren't firing properly. Hamstrings weren't firing properly. Glute wasn't firing properly. QL, quadratus lumborum, wasn't firing properly. Psoas was probably working too hard, you would say. And a lot of it came back to they kicked their pinky toe when they were 6 years of age, and the client had completely forgotten about this injury until I was like, something's happening to the pinky. Can you like unpack that a little bit for me? And they're like, no, nothing. And then I started performing. I started trying to find out what stimulus is it still perceiving as a threat. And all of a sudden it came to the client that when they were 6 years of age, they were running along, stubbed their pinky toe on a paver, and they remembered how traumatic it was at that age.
Yeah, I think all the listeners at home can feel that viscerally. Even just describing, everyone's done that. I jagged my toe this morning on the corner of the table, and it's just, I think everyone has that experience where it locks on, and that's a good one where you can really see how something incredibly long term, because we got down the rabbit hole of conversation around I suppose a lot of the modern psychology is based on, I suppose, a lot of these theories now as well with early childhood periods a lot of the stuff we pick up there can have flow-on effects to subconscious now and our behavioral patterns and loops and the way that we interpret our environment as well, whether we're conscious or not. A lot of modern psychology is based on, a lot of those developmental years, 2 to 7, where we do. And so where you're saying there, where things that we could have long forgotten ever were an insult or an injury or a problem back then, the nervous system doesn't forget it because I guess going right back to the survival type part, it can't afford to not remember it, right? Because if it doesn't, we can't afford to wait to see if it's life-threatening, right? So, okay. So I can roll with that.
But
So
we're also the best compensators in the world. Like, it's not to say that every little injury we need to unpack and worry about it, but sometimes it is super relevant in some people's story and context of how they came to have SI joint, like sacroiliac joint pain. So during, manual therapy days, I would never be able to sit there and go, your right shoulder was connected to your lumbar spine and your left hip. I would have looked at your overall posture, looked at different, we need to release this, release that, strengthen here, strengthen there. But at the end of the day, we didn't need to do any of that. All we needed to do was provide enough safety inputs back to your subconscious brain and your nervous system to restore the faith in it that it needed to be able to go, okay, I'm happy to free your right shoulder up now. I no longer need to use all these protective resources and strategies to stop you using your right shoulder because I've now got information where I was asking you to provide it to me. You just didn't know how to listen and how to find that answer.
Yeah, and I find that's really cool because I like the part around as well. I love the idea because I'm hoping people listening at home can understand just how much resource it takes. And you used a good analogy for this before when we were talking about it. How much of how much capacity is being chewed up just in background noise of your body having to constantly protect and interpret that it's in threat. If it's perceiving this threats or if it's got these things that we're not even conscious of happening, it's still chewing up bandwidth. It's still eating up capacity, right? If you've got if in the most simplified term, if you think about your ability to recover from an insult or ability to overcome stresses and become resilient, your, I suppose, nervous system's battery, so to speak, of your recovery versus your insult. If you've constantly, I suppose it's almost a rigged race. If you're already in this state of predetermined flight or fight for most of the time, you're not even able to get into the state, which then facilitates recovery. And I didn't put the dots together until a bit later in the piece that recovery isn't just sitting on the couch for a period of time, because if you've got someone who's got their body's interpreting it's jacked up, or if their flight or fight doesn't even have to be a physical injury. Again, it can be that stressful call you had with your boss yesterday, that email you opened you didn't want to open, that thing you're thinking about next week. It could be the magnesium deficiency you're not aware you've got, any of these things. That's there. You're still in that sympathetic state. You're not able to flick into the state. You can't access the state where recovery actually happens, right? And I found this with your, after we went away from the house party, went and had an actual treatment, you went through or did assessments on me and started working with it, right? And for the next week, I was so relaxed, I felt almost day drunk. It was the weirdest thing ever. I remember seeing your voice message going, man, I'm just doughy and just daydreaming. It was just like nothing. I get a call from an employee. It's like, oh, the world's on fire. And I'd just be like, yeah, it's cool, man. No worries. Cheers. And I was just like on a cloud, right? And I hadn't not felt stress, I realized, in living memory. I've always had multiple jobs, the business running at full intensity, running multiple states and staff and retailers and businesses and factories and all these things happening. That was the first time I felt true relaxation in fucking forever, outside of, going on a holiday overseas and throwing my phone in the Mediterranean, right? That was the most relaxing thing I'd had in forever. And it was you liking it, turning that switch off. So when you're doing these treatments, is it top down? Are you trying to just basically modulate the nervous system to go, let's just be more parasympathetic as a whole? Or is it the specificity come into it going, what are the specific insults that we need to target? Like, is it just chill as a whole to your nervous system you're trying to do with treatments? Or are you more going, where in particular is a stored threat or issue? Or how do you attack it?
There's probably a couple of different angles. Like, it depends on what someone's goal is. If it's for restricted pain or movement, we're going to look at and if they're looking for performance, I'm going to do a little bit of stuff on the table, but then I'm going to put them closer to the area that they perform in, right? Because let's say as a sport, let's because I come from golf. Let's say it's golf, right? Let's say they're trying to make a swing change, and doesn't matter how many reps they've tried to put in, it's still not clicking for them. Their performance has dropped. Okay, well, let's ask your nervous system if it actually perceives the swing change as safe or as a threat. And if it's perceiving it as a threat, okay, where does the body need more information from to perceive what you're trying to do as safe? So that way it's no longer trying to protect you, and it will actually take off the handbrakes, if you will. Like the brain will put the handbrakes, or like a governor on our performance, if it's perceiving too much of what we're doing as a threat. But once it starts to go, okay, I don't need to protect you in this environment, then all of a sudden performance tends to go through the roof, because it's no longer trying to protect you. It's going, okay, go for your life. Like you can perform as good as you can now, and we can actually start to put in reps now, reps and sets to further ingrain and strengthen that muscle memory, as opposed to if it's just perceiving the movement itself as a threat, you're just going to have to keep compensating on compensation on compensation to keep feeding it and hoping one day it clicks. And whether that's squatting, deadlifting, swinging a golf club, running, then I'd say it looks different for those people. But if someone's looking to sleep better, or they've had a traumatic past, whether it's emotional trauma, physical trauma, like car accidents, things like that, I'm going to unpack that differently in terms of we're going to assess certain functions of the nervous system. Like there's another great guy I learnt from, functional neurohealth, who he does amazing work with primitive reflexes. So we're born with these primitive reflexes, like everyone's seen a baby when you stimulate their cheek, they know to turn toward the mother's milk because it's feeding time. But these reflexes, as another example, is when you walk into a loud room, you make a loud noise and the baby jumps. These are key to our survival, but after the first 2 years of life, these should integrate and go away, because like you were saying with bandwidth, when these reflexes don't integrate properly and they stay present, they're using up a lot of resources and a lot of bandwidth within the nervous system. And it makes sense to think the brain's only keeping these on out of it feels its survival is under threat. So why would the brain compensate that hard by keeping these very primal primitive reflexes on that should go away after the first 2 years of life? Why would it keep them on when we're 15, 20 years of age? It does it out of protection. So so we need to look at it from that point of view in terms of, do you have reflexes present, and what sort of effects is that having downstream on the nervous system, and what other functions of the nervous system are now out of whack, potentially because of the reflexes, or like does your vestibular system need more information in order to restore mobility to your right knee, or does it need more information from a particular head position that we use every day? Every step we take with our 10,000 steps a day, it needs to access these positions. And if the brain doesn't feel safe enough to express that, that's having some sort of physiological effect on the body, which is then ties into you have enough of these systems that aren't firing optimally, or there's too much perceived threat in the system to where now it needs to compensate that hard to where, excess cortisol's at play, we're not sleeping properly. It's trying to send us all these signals on our dashboard to say, hey, we need to rein things in and get things in order again. So it's assessing these different functions that should be working in a particular way and find out if they're not working properly, where does the body need more information to get these things firing properly again.
I love what you said there with the what's showing up on the dashboard, because that's a perfect analogy to try and give people, I suppose, used to seeing apps on your phone or getting notifications on your phone when things are. I think it's a really great way for listeners to conceptualize, to try and get them to start listening to feedback. Because I thought it really struck me as bizarre that more people weren't more in tune with their body until I started making supplementation and realized that, and doing it on a large scale, right? And when you start making sleep supplements, you'd ask someone how they slept and they weren't sure if it was better or not. And I was like, how can you not be sure if you slept better or not? Do you not know if you have more energy? Do you not know if you felt fresh or foggy? Do you not know if you baffled me, right? But I realized a lot of the time, all of this stimulus, all this noise, and all of the busy and the distraction, the scrolling, texting, calling, driving, all the noise quite often stops us from actually checking in with the body and going, okay, what's coming up, right? So when you're saying dashboard, I'd love to rattle off a few obvious ones for people who have got an overwhelmed nervous system, because I find a lot of the time the first step that's the best one, even if someone's listening to this podcast and all this goes over their head, or maybe it is relevant and they want to know why, I think some of the best places to look for are those symptom pictures of a jacked up nervous system, of high cortisol, of what to expect. What are those notifications your body's giving you going, hey, check in here, right? And you said sleep first. I would love to start there because that's the most obvious place, right? So when you're seeing buckets of cortisol and people are really stressed out and so on, what about sleep specifically are you seeing, or what are you noticing with people that you're hearing about? And then I'll share my stuff.
I suppose the common, like nothing groundbreaking, but just easy ones, because most people, to be honest, most clients that I see, they might know a little bit about cortisol, but they don't know how that affects their sleep or their hunger levels and all that sort of stuff. So even just basic stuff, are you getting up one or more times to pee at night? Because if you are, that shows as an interruption in your sleep cycles. That shouldn't happen. We should, when our body wakes us up to pee of a morning, it means hormones are kicking in. We're ready to start the day. We shouldn't be doing that at midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever it may be. So easy things like that. Or do they have a constant niggle that is never really going away, or are they constantly having to avoid certain movements? Like, have they lost the ability to even just be able to pick something up without going, can I do this without hurting myself? Because so many people do that. They've pinched a nerve in their back once, or they've pulled a muscle, and now all of a sudden the brain is consciously going, can I actually do this without throwing my back out? Or can I pick that dumbbell up or whatever it may be without hurting my back? Can I move the bed by myself? And again, a lot movement is so reflexive and subconscious. Like, when was the last time you went to the gym or went for a walk or just went to pick the kettle up? You didn't sit there and go, make sure my shoulder blade's pulled back. I'm making sure I'm activating my deltoid properly. Like, that is way too noisy. Like, the nervous system is on automatic. Like, we only use like up to like 10% of our conscious brain. So, but all the treatment modalities and everything we're doing, we're trying to consciously change things or get someone to be better at activating a certain muscle, but all our movement is subconscious. So we need to be able to tap into that and go, hey, where do you need information to switch your glutes on or activate your rhomboid for you? It shouldn't be it shouldn't be consciously controlled or consciously driven to be able to move the bed without hurting your back. You should be able to just do it.
Yeah, it's funny to say that, man, because then you can conceptualize very easily how that should be subconscious, and again, how much resource it takes to have to think about each one, purposely activate lat, lock in shoulder, cool, lift, pick up, move. Like, all of those require processes, right? All that chews up neurotransmitters, all of that requires neural pathways from here down through to innervate musculature and uses up acetylcholine and uses up all these, So I can get how that would become very busy very quickly for it. And to look at less complicated ones too for people, because sleep is exactly where I go first, because everyone sleeps, and it's one of the best things it's relative to everyone. Like, when I'm dealing with hormonal balance, obviously it's drastically different for females versus I'm working with men, right? But with sleep, it's the equalizer, and it's the first place stress shows up. And not just to wake up throughout the night. I see people, they struggle to get to sleep as well. So like that real busy mind, even though you're physically exhausted from a huge day and you can feel it, like your eyes are heavy and you're physically buggered, but your mind is just go, go, go. And ironically, so what do? We numb that, we reach for a phone and we start scrolling. And we wonder why we've got something, a source of light and information right at our face, and we wonder why we can't switch off further. It's this self-perpetuating thing. So, and
some people go to bed feeling more awake than they have felt all day, which is like another key indicator that something's off.
Oh, that's a good one, actually. Yes, that evening wind. So if someone, this is another one as well. So if you've gotten home and you are exhausted from big days at work, so you hit that 2-3 p.m. slump at work, you're buggered, you're hitting the wall during the day, you get home at night, you get home in the evening, get home from work, and you notice yourself picking up and starting to get more energy throughout the afternoon. Hey, I'm feeling really good. This is great. Go play with the kids, run around. This is great. And you find it, you're like really go, clean. I'm going to clean the kitchen, go here, cook dinner, do this. You're on, right? And you're like, and it's funny because like it's you get distracted by the daily routine or what have you, but you're not actually paying attention. Hey, I was buggered all day, but I'm energized in the evening. And I see it with shift workers. I see it with people who have had chronic stress as well, that dysfunction of that cortisol curve. And I suppose cortisol has finally become spoken about a lot more than it used to be. And it gets bashed a lot, but it is a very powerful and necessary hormone because we are talking about survival, and it is a massive priority. But people who have got that, who should be looking for inputs, to give your body hints as to what to look for, picking up in the evening, taking a long time to get to sleep, that busy mind at night, getting up to go to the bathroom throughout the night. When you wake up, to your alarm, are you foggy headed and buggered? Like, do you have to wake up to an alarm? Do you have to hit snooze 2 or 3 times because you just can't muster the fortitude to get out of bed? Like, are you just daisy and foggy head until you get that caffeine? You have to slam that coffee, slam a second one, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm coming through now. Waking
up more tired than when you actually went to bed.
Bingo, man. And you see this with we spoke about tracking devices right before, so wearables. I mean, you were one of the early adopters, mate, back in your marathon days. I remember you were back on HRV back before people were talking about it. So in the era of wearables, when people are tracking sleep, you can see low REM sleep, low deep sleep, lots of wake events throughout the night, higher resting heart rate. You can see a lot of this stuff. You see low HRV afterwards. You see in Garmin's and such, they'll give you usually like a body battery, or in a Whoop, I think it's a readiness score. You'll see different metrics declining over time as well. And then, like you said, the recurring niggling injuries and stuff. Now, also in terms of other less common ones, man, we spoke about hunger cues and we spoke about digestion a bit as well. You had some gut issues back in the day as well, and you had some, and I think nutrition's a bit of a fun complementary pathway, but somewhere else I'd like to quickly just dive into. When we're stressed, we're switching off blood supply to our gut. We're not, our digestive system takes a back seat, right? Whether we're eating or not. So with your background, though, you said you had a lot of issues in the past with foods that were a problem when you were really churning through calories training for hard events. So what was your sort of issues that you ran into with food, and because that was that led you into later on having to...
Yeah, I suppose I didn't grow up with the healthiest diet in the world. Like, we had Maccas at least once a week. Back in the days of playing golf, I thought Subway was a healthy meal at that point. Chinese, McDonald's, Red Rooster, whatever it may be. Like, a home cooked meal was like a few times a week, but once you kind of hit that time where you're out of home or you're on the road a lot, like, it's just whatever you can grab. But it was actually the opposite of, once I started getting healthier, the more issues I started to notice arise. So I'd eat a salad, and foods that had agreed with me, all of a sudden I'm like, why am I getting an upset stomach after eating like capsicum, for instance, or dairy started doing a number on me. So different stuff like that. Just the healthier I got, the worse my gut health seemed to be. And I had a great naturopath tell me at that point, it's kind of like the nervous system's kind of telling you again, you've abused me for that long kind of thing, that now you've shown me some freedom. Anytime I give it something that's more on that edge of pushing back toward more unhealthy stuff, it's saying, I'm not ready for this. I'm still need more nourishment at this point.
I'm going to jump on that one because I get this a lot now, where it's almost become trendy to be lactose intolerant or to have food sensitivity. It's good as awareness around it, but it's gotten a bit crazy. But I think it also gets misdiagnosed as a jacked up nervous system, because I 1,000,000% agree. When we have that chronically elevated stress, we have a lot of like proteins like zonulin, which is super inflammatory to the gut lining. And if you imagine your gut lining not as a perfectly smooth lining, but actually more like there are fingers along the base of your gut lining, and the actual like gut lining itself is more like a tight woven mesh than it is a perfectly smooth muscle. And as that zonulin expression keeps inflaming that more and more, those gaps open more and more, and we start letting more and more things through, which immediately assaults our immune system and really jacks up our immune responses too, and does heaps of stuff with inflammation in the gut. And a lot of the time we see people going, oh, I've got a lactose sensitivity, or I have issues with gluten, or no, you've just been chronically stressed for 5 years, your gut's inflamed as hell. Anything you throw in there, it's just going to blow up because it's so inflamed in that gut lining. You haven't got an issue with gluten there, Karen. Like, it's just your gut screwed because you're stressed. So it's funny because you put these people, you throw them on adrenal supplementation, getting them sleeping, do a bit of healing and sealing with the gut with some curcumin and glutamine or whatever, and they're like champions. They can drink a gallon of full cream milk and no one cares, But you going there is probably, ironically, you say you got it healthier, but you're having worse issues.
Yeah.
I think it's more that we all have a bit of a ticking time bomb with our nervous system. We abuse it when we're younger, and then eventually you get to a certain point. And everyone's got a different genetic predisposition, a different point they get to, but at some point something starts breaking.
Yeah.
First it's subtle, it's a whisper, then it's a yell, then it's a scream, right? So yours started with gut and digestive issues, yeah? And I suppose, was this around the time when you were going really deep in the weeds of like, was that more the enduro stuff, or was that when you were still in golfing?
Yeah, the endurance sport stuff, because obviously you can't get up and expect the body to train 10, 15 hours a week on top of working full-time if you're fueling it with crap. Well, I couldn't anyway. Some people can get away with it, I guess, until something breaks.
Something breaks, yeah.
I was a sensitive little butterfly, I suppose, where things were showing up pretty quick for me of, hey, you need to sort something out. And I was cool with that because I learnt my lessons pretty quick and pretty hard, where unfortunately some people, whether it's a physical injury, a gut issue, a health problem like the thyroid, whatever it may be, sometimes unfortunately it's a bigger bang for others than it is for some. Like I was lucky that mine was, bloating around eating, GI distress, that kind of thing, where other people, it takes their thyroid to kind of start caving in, or like working against them before.
Or chronic fatigue, or they hit complete burnout and they can't get out of bed for a month, or man, I've seen this. It's amazing, and I didn't realize the link was so strong between it. And I guess when you said before, certain people can deal with stress better or worse, and I think it's almost like a curse. I was always quite a chill person, and so I think I had a longer runway. I was naturally more parasympathetic. I was naturally more relaxed, and so I could handle more stress chronically, which almost wasn't better because I took me a lot longer to realize I was cramming my body full of stress, right? But
better compensator,
right? Which is evolutionary a great thing, right? Being able to endure stress, cool. It's been an advantage for me in business, an advantage in life. But I started reading some really interesting works with like some medical doctors who were looking at the long-term health effects of chronic stress on metabolic diseases, on inflammation, on insulin resistance, on visceral fat, and what that'll do. And I started realizing and also cardiovascular risk and increasing blood pressure and so many really scary things. We see people in their 40s and 50s dying from early heart failure, and people having really significantly impaired health at young ages with not a huge amount of warning signs. So I'm hoping for listeners at home that some of those notifications on the dashboard, so to speak, of the tired but wide feelings, the crappy sleep, waking up throughout the night, the really jacked up niggles and injuries, the overthinking things as well, like having
even little things like some people might notice and I talked to you about this when I worked on you, of if you're sensitive to loud noises, like you shouldn't be that startled by a bang goes off. But if a car backfires or whatever it may be, sure, there's a bit of an awareness response, but some people, like, that's like a big deal to them. Their heart rate's going and it takes them a long time to actually wind back down from just a car backfiring when they drive past. Which is a key indicator and maybe a little bit of a sign that their nervous system is not as integrated or working as well as what it should be. Or light sensitivity. A lot of people that I see, because it's they've been compensating a long time, sometimes they notice they are super sensitive to light, or sometimes they're not aware of it until you actually shine a light in their eye and they go, I hate that. Like they actually want to move away from it, and then you correct whatever needs to be done, and then I can hold the light there all day, not a problem.
Yeah, it's funny, man, how I saw that in a recent time when I was we're doing 5 product launches, and I normally do probably 2 a year, and I did 5 in a month, right? And I was like maxed out in every capacity. And it got to a point where I'd be having dinner and just the scraping of a fork on a plate was making my ears ring, and I was like, okay, I need to back the fuck off right now. So it's funny, man. You can get these cues there. Ignoring them doesn't do us any favors, but I love that we could tie those in. So I'll give people because I'm conscious we've only got an hour with you, mate. So I want to make sure we give people some real gems, right? I'll give a few little ones, I think, if the nervous system piece is relevant from a supplemental angle, but for yourself, man, what are your best steps, I suppose, or early interventions or things you can start doing that you recommend with people when you first start working with them? If some of these things sounded familiar today, what are some of the, I suppose, is there anything they can be doing at home, or is it more so quite specific treatments? Is there anything you'd recommend?
It depends on where they're coming from, what they're looking to get out of it. In terms of simple everyday stuff they can do, I mean, it's nothing I've come up with. It's more so just there's plenty of health gurus talking about it, but just the simple fact of when you wake up, go outside, walk on the grass without shoes on, turn your head from side to side looking at the horizon. That is a key safety signal back to the brain that it's kind of, you're looking along amongst like your pride lands kind of thing. Like you're kind of assessing your environment,
yes,
getting natural light in your eyes, those kinds of things, but also just walking. We're geared for, that's literally why I name my business Wired to Move, is because we are literally wired for movement. The ability to just go for a walk without anything in your hands, not holding your phone, not texting while you're, even if you can, try and remove the earbuds, listen to the sounds outside, but just walking in itself and getting that crossing the midline pattern of the arms swinging from side to side is a massive safety signal to the brain, whether you're suffering from mental health symptoms or whether you've got physical issues. Just going for a walk is massive.
And it's amazing how I think we get wrapped up, at least in the fitness industry, everything's about people are tracking training steps, diet, tracking calories, writing in their program, everything's so high level. But to the average person listening, if you're wondering how important some of these things can be, just walking, and I think it was like 22 minutes of walking can reduce cortisol by 30%. I think it was 32%. From literally a 20-minute walk, you reduce it by a third. And even if you want to take that a little bit further, go, what if we got a gym membership and train 3 times a week? 3 times a week after 8 weeks, reduce baseline cortisol secretion from stressors by 38%. So nearly a 40% reduction in the amount of cortisol you put out in response to a stressful event just by training 3 times a week. So that means like train a day, have 2 rest days, train a day, have another rest day, train once, another rest day. It's like more off days than on. If you can just do 3 days a week, you can reduce your stress expression, I suppose, 40-odd%. But there's some really interesting ones. Looking at your horizon, getting some good tracking there, and just getting more movement in, because I think sometimes also if we have all this jacked up adrenaline and cortisol, just physically releasing that through movement, just letting your body actually burn some energy and get some of that, that can really help too.
But even the workout, whether they just love working out or whether they're like you, when you had to avoid certain exercises when you're bodybuilding, like you had to avoid certain shoulder exercises, like that is a key indicator that there's missing gaps of information. Or, if you're trying to do a squat, you shouldn't have to consciously be, am I activating my glutes? Am I activating my hamstrings? That should happen reflexively, because again, we don't consciously control those things. They happen too fast. So finding the gaps in information, going, okay, if I need to keep doing clamshells or whatever glute prehab exercise, if you need to do that every time before you squat or do a glute exercise or to get your glutes activated, there's gaps in information in your nervous system. That should all happen automatically, and your brain's compensating. It's doing it for a reason, but it's compensating around that. It's compensating around another issue, which is why your glutes and hamstrings aren't firing.
Yeah, it's almost always upstream, I should say. And I see this in the supplement world. People come in asking for a pre-workout. They want energy, so they ask for a pre-workout. When in reality, it's a cortisol issue or an adrenal issue. It's funny. What we need isn't what we want isn't often what we need, right? Like we want the stimulant, we want that quick kick of caffeine to give us energy. What we need is a deep adrenal reset. We need more sleep quality. We need to be winding down that nervous system. So, mate, this has been awesome to tie these two worlds together. Mate, I think people from this will hopefully be going, God, I need to look at this. And if they wanted to connect with you, mate, where are the best platforms to connect with you? How do they come find you? Wired to Move.
At Wired to Move on Instagram. I've got at Wired to Move on Facebook. I'm on Google, but I'm in the process of still finishing my website. But just Instagram and Facebook, you'll see plenty of stuff on there. So
unreal, mate. Thanks for coming on, because I think it's really great to be able to tie together the supplemental world, some of the the physical world as well, with the anatomy pieces as well, and tie together a athletic background that you've got as well, and then tie it all together with some really cool synergies that were apparent there. So, fascinating conversation.
And just quickly to that, with your world of the supplement side of things, a lot of people are using pre-workouts and stuff like that as survival mechanisms in terms of it. They're just using it to get through the day. They need that buzz. They need that pickup. But once your nervous system's in order, they actually become performance enhancers, which is what they were designed for in the first place. Like they shouldn't be drivers to keep you going. They should be actually increasing your performance and helping you get better as opposed to just getting through that next workout.
Instead of a compensation mechanism, right? 100%, man. People get asked me for the Band-Aid, but it's funny when they'll come to me for a fat burner and I'll give them a sleep aid and they're like, why have I got a sleep product? I ask you for a fat burner, mate. But it's quite often what you need isn't what you want. So man, all right, guys. Well, anyone who's listened today who's gotten value out of this one, make sure you follow Brendan on Wired to Move. You're doing consults now as well. So if anyone thinks this is something you'd like to try for yourself, make sure you DM, reach out, hit up Brendan for a session, because I've personally had a pretty amazing experience with it early on, and I've tried a bucket load of therapies in my time, mate. So thanks for coming in, sharing a different angle and coming at it from a different lens. Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.
Not real.
Thanks.